Some extraordinary gardeners like Virgil Severns and Terry Reichert have been growing winter squash in Alaska for years, but for us ordinary gardeners, it's becoming a much more reliable and feasible crop. Hi, I'm Heidi Rader here in the Alaska Garden. I'm an associate professor of extension with the University of Alaska Fairbanks, and I'm going to talk all about growing vegetables, flowers, and berries productively and sustainably in Alaska. If you're gardening for food security, squash is a great option because you can store it without having to can it, but you can cubed winter squash. Storing as is saves time during the mad dash of fall when we are trying to cook and eat all of our fresh produce from the garden, preserve what we can't eat, as well as pick berries, fish, and hunt. Not only does winter squash actually provide some calories as opposed to greens, it is paleo-friendly, gluten-free, delicious, and nutritious. If you don't have the space to grow squash, you can find locally available winter squash at your farmer's market. In Fairbanks, some varieties are performing incredibly well in unreplicated trials. In 2020, spaghetti squash yielded 85 pounds per plant, while Getty Okosomin produced 48 pounds per plant. Harvest Moon and Red Curry performed best in 2021, producing 35 and 43 pounds of squash per plant respectively. Getty Okosomin, Red Curry, Lakota, and Honeyboat topped the charts in terms of taste. In 2022, 12 varieties of winter squash were trialed in Fairbanks. Winter squash performed a lot less well in unreplicated trials at the Matanuska Agriculture Experiment Station. Glenna Gannon, director of the vegetable variety trials, figures it could have been that Typar or IRT plastic was not used, the temperature is cooler than Fairbanks, and the transplants were not fertilized. She thinks a hoop house or high tunnel could make all the difference in successfully growing winter squash in the Matanuska Valley or cooler parts of Alaska. If you want to try growing winter squash, you'll want to start seeds in late April to early May in 4-inch pots and transplant them outside after the danger of frost has passed. You can also cover them with frost cloth or remay to give them some extra protection in case of a frost. As with most vegetables, close to a neutral pH is ideal. They are heavy nitrogen feeders. If you have the space, plant your squash in a different spot each year to minimize diseases and pests. You'll want to use one or more season extension techniques to grow the winter squash: plastic mulch, low tunnel, high tunnel, or a greenhouse. In Fairbanks trials, the squash is planted in infrared transmitting mulch. The Typar helps minimize rotting by keeping the squash clean, and it also helps produce a lot of heat too. In rainier parts of Alaska, low tunnels, high tunnels, or greenhouses help protect the squash from the rain in addition to warming air temperatures. If you have a small space like I do, consider planting 1 or 2 plants of the bush or semi-bush varieties, like Pinnacle, a spaghetti squash, bonbon, or the gold nugget bush variety. These can be spaced 1.5 to 2 feet apart, with the rows 6 feet apart. The long vining varieties will need to be spaced 2 to 3 feet apart, with rows 12 feet apart. Acorn, butternut, delicata, and sweet dumpling are sensitive to long days and as a result do not reliably produce female flowers, particularly in the more northern parts of Alaska. According to Oregon State University, squash is ready to harvest when stems are dry and corky. The squash plant has died or a lot of rain is in the forecast. Johnny Seeds recommends curing squash for 5 to 10 days at 80 to 85 degrees Fahrenheit and 75 to 85% relative humidity, then storing them long-term in a cool, dry, well-ventilated area at 50 to 55 degrees Fahrenheit and 50 to 75% relative humidity. Storage potential for different varieties is 2 to 6 months, and some storage time is necessary for certain species to be palatable. Research in Western Oregon found that as long as storage was above freezing, a much wider range of temperature and humidity was okay. One of the hurdles with eating winter squash is chopping it up. Personally, I've found that if I cut off the ends, make holes with a fork, and microwave it for about 3 minutes, more for larger squash, It makes peeling and chopping the squash much easier. The Eat Winter Vegetable Project suggests using a chef knife at least 8 inches or larger, cutting the end off the squash to create a flat surface, then slicing the squash vertically on a cutting board. If it is slippery, use a towel on the cutting board to keep it in place. They also have some helpful videos to show the various techniques of chopping, cooking, and peeling squash. For more information on growing and cooking winter squash, follow the links at the end of this video.